Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Joseph, and I've spent most of my life as an operator running large bus and rail systems and on-demand systems throughout the country and elsewhere around the world. Today, I'm going to talk about the mobility's impact on real estate, and we'll start here in Chicago. Does that look familiar? That's Randolph and Dearborn, and in fact, the more things change, sometimes the more they stay the same. We know that there's still a lot of congestion there. The fact is, you also know that over a 10-year period, we went from horses to horseless, and we'll go from drivers to driverless probably over the same 10-year period. Now, we're going to talk about the disruption and where and how it's transforming, this mobility disruption, where and how it's transforming all of these activities that we're involved in. Conventional wisdom wants to put us in a box and say that it's either a black or white outcome. In fact, this is going to be something where there's going to be winners and losers both in the cities and the suburbs. And what we do know is those who don't think about mobility in terms of real estate are the ones that are going to fall behind. So let's look at this video for a second.
It's been a century, and it is time to move on. Skytran is the first public transit system that's as personal as a car. It will unclog our cities and transform our lives. With Skytran, there's no schedule. Its predictive artificial intelligence knows when you need your ride. Stations are so narrow they can fit over sidewalks, so they are always just a short walk away. Skytran's revolutionary magnetic levitation technology enables you to fly on a cushion of air. Traveling in a skypod is so quiet and smooth that you can comfortably...
So, this is VTOL. This is electric vertical takeoff and landing, Uber concept. This pricing looks like right now Boeing is invested, Uber's invested, others are investing in this. Pricing in San Francisco, proposed pricing is about $100 to go from downtown San Francisco to SFO in a 5-minute ride. We'll come back to VTOL. On the other slide, the other video that you just saw a minute ago, Skytran, this is a company that started in Israel. Eric Schmidt is one of the backers of this company. The most important thing to know is that this is about 1/10 the cost of rail development today. And it can fit into these streets. So you could be looking at the L here in Chicago, the L of tomorrow. When we think about what exists already, this is a great example, a system that I visited in Medellin, Colombia. This is an example of real efficiency in terms of intermodal connections from bus to metro to an aerial gondola tram system that goes into the mountains very inexpensively and serves a number of socioeconomic background neighborhoods there, and I think is a great deployment. So what's driving this change today that we're going to see in terms of mobility? It's this generational difference, I believe, in large part. And when we look at this and we think about boomers like me versus millennials like my kids, we can think about the behaviors. Certain things are obvious to you. Maybe some are a little less obvious. The largest parking operator in the country said to me, look, when we look at the future of parking, all we have to do is look at concerts. And when there are concerts for boomers like Elton John, our parking lots are filled. And when there are concerts for like Martin Garrix, the parking lots are empty because all the millennials are taking Uber, scooters, and other ways to the concert. The other thing that's clear, physical retail versus digital, less clear to many of us is our generation thinking about the value of material properties and assets, and millennials thinking of value of travel and Instagrammable experiences. That's something that I think is important to remember. Also important to remember is no matter what generation, we're all social animals and we like to congregate. There's safety in numbers. So when we think about the pace of change in mobility, we can think about first the left side and what's caused this fast adoption. First, the smartphone, second, shared economy, and now on-demand economy. What we expected in terms of delivery in 3 days. We expect now in 3 hours or even less. And this is going to become increasingly more a part of our life. So the technology platforms are there. What's going to be the impact in terms of real estate, and what should we look for? First, the cost of vehicle services in the short run might go up. There's a lot of pressure for Uber and Lyft to raise prices right now, given the huge losses. But in the long term, those prices are going to drop significantly. Number two, in terms of opportunity cost of travel, we see a lot of friction right now in travel, and we're going to see the unproductive become productive, and that's going to change travel and opportunities for real estate development, which we'll talk about in a minute. I think two important things on this slide are, one, to think from a developer's perspective, from a real estate owner's perspective, of identifying where that friction is today and where that friction is tomorrow. The waiting in lines, the airport security, other security, downtown security, other areas that are going to be the opportunity, because where that friction is, that's where the growth opportunities are. And when we look at this small bar chart at the bottom, this is the price dropping on transportation per mile from drivers to driverless. You can see taxis at $3.50 a mile, all the way down to autonomous at 35 cents a mile. Actually, I think the autonomous vehicles will be about 20 cents a mile. So when that happens, you can see how ubiquitous these vehicles will be and how they can incorporate other services. We heard earlier on the panel about changing the mindset. Well, in fact, one of these mindset changes is thinking about overnight travel. This company, Cabin, I advise, I think it's a great company because they're mastering one of the most important use cases, which is sleep in a moving vehicle. And so today you can ride from San Francisco to LA in one of these overnight vehicles. It's a hotel on wheels. When you really think about the opportunity here, this is an opportunity to have a catalog of destinations for weekends and to own the night, because that's the time to travel. If you can get a good night's sleep and wake up the next morning in another city, it's a great way to think about changing travel patterns. The other is a concept of a productive gym bus. You could be riding your Peloton to work, literally. There's a lot of talk about mobility as a service. Just a couple minutes on what is mobility as a service. Mobility as a service, think of it as the Amazon of transportation. This is sort of the holy grail in transportation. It's connecting all of these modes and integrating all these modes into an app that will navigate for you. First, do your journey planning, and then give you the connectivity between all these modes on one platform, one payment system. Now, that means you'll wake up in the morning and it'll say, "Good morning, Mark. Your commute today will be 32 minutes. You'll take the scooter to the metro to downtown, and then Uber to work. When I look up where to go for a restaurant for dinner, it'll tell me how to get there." That's the navigation part. I believe the killer app here is a subscription service, all-you-can-eat service for this. Once this becomes $350 a month or $250 a month for all of these services, you use the navigation and you use all of the services, that's when you'll see mobility as a service become a reality. And I think we're on the way, especially when we have 20 cents a mile for the autonomous vehicle. So what does the future of residential real estate look like? Well, we know what's happening in cities, and we know that, that there's 80% of the people living in cities, but we also know that there's a trend even today that when millennials have the kids, they move to the suburbs after the kids, and we have still these car-based suburbs. But one prediction I would say is that we could see this suburbs 2.0, which are villages with a city center. This is very important because for millennials, they want a city center. They want a place to connect. This can be enabled, even longer commutes can be enabled, these super commutes with AVs. And you could think of micro-ownership of small units in the city, living with a place where you have a better quality of life, you have land, you're not priced out of the American dream, and you have a community that also has this mobility. If this picture looks familiar, it's because these villages already exist throughout Europe. And so we could see this as a potential example for the States. Just where I live in the DC area. I will share with you, when I was growing up, everybody wanted to move to Potomac, Maryland. Big houses, big property. Today you can't give away one of those houses. Yet, even further out, double the commute in Frederick, Maryland, you have a village, a city that people will commute longer, but have a better quality of life. So, I'm going the wrong direction. So, when we think about this commute, what might the commute look like? Here's a Volvo concept showing a couple form factors for this commute. What I would say, if you're thinking about where we should be developing, in the past it was always transit-oriented development around rail systems. The deployment of autonomous vehicles will be along corridors, geofenced areas. This is where the edge cases can be sorted out quickly, and already Waymo and others are deploying in this area. If you look at where these corridors are, that's where I believe a lot of the development will occur, and it'll enable a number of other things. So one of the challenges for many is how do you solve the school issue? You have the virtuous circle on the right. Better schools equal higher home values, which equal higher taxes, and again, more investment in schools. But what if that were to change in two ways? One is this suburb 2.0 that could be even further out and benefit from these type of schools. But what if you lived in the city and your kids commuted to the better schools? What if they had access to better schools, no matter where they were, no matter what income level? They had moving classrooms. I believe this is in the not too distant future, and already investing and working on a project like this, and we think we'll see significant results and impact access. We heard a lot about parking and what's happening in terms of monetization of the curb. I think you have to think about, first of all, we've just replaced some single occupancy vehicles with single occupancy Uber, Lyft vehicles that we ride in. So we've traded one for one, and we have huge congestion problems. We're still going to need buses and rail in cities, and we're still going to have service along these corridors. But how are we going to get people to move, especially the delivery vehicles, because a lot of the congestion in cities are the delivery vehicles, and where should they be relocated? How can we better manage the logistics side? So we have two major challenges: the flow and the logistics and distribution, and the monetization of the curb will serve to help solve some of that problem, as well as relocation. We also see this not only in cities, but at the airports, where we're trying to see these solutions. And I believe we'll see them in the next year or two. You can see parking, reuse of parking garages. You heard a little bit about that before. But let's talk about parking lots. This company, Reef, formerly Park Jockey, is the largest parking operator in North America, having acquired Impark and Lanier. And I like the way they're looking at parking. First of all, they're thinking that parking is really, up till now, warehousing cars, but in the future, it's warehousing goods on a platform. That platform is proximity as a service. So when you think about the platform, they say that they'll let the market decide what are those services, what are the goods and services, and how do you manage that on this real estate. And you can already see hyper-local retail. You can see Uber and Lyft waiting areas, autonomous vehicles repair, storage, deployment, a number of uses here. But it's clear that these spaces will be the new mobility hubs, and it will change how we work and live. And the advantage of this is we can start to think about some important new uses where there's going to be big disruption. Most of you have heard about cloud kitchens and know that Travis Kalanick, who after founding Uber, now believes that the cloud kitchen business will be larger than the Uber business. He says it's a business for everybody who eats. Well, in the case of Reef, I visited this location here in Miami, and the day I was there, they were celebrating a delivery time 13 minutes from order to delivery of food. This is a data-driven business. The fact is you can locate these kitchens near where the demand is, and you can know what that type of demand is. You can know what you're going to be preparing. And this could change the neighborhoods that right now are food deserts because of the growing demand for delivery of food. Two things about autonomous vehicles. One is that we're going to see, as I mentioned, rapid deployment already. We're seeing Waymo starting to scale. But even faster than autonomous vehicles for passengers, we're going to see lots of autonomous vehicles for goods. This Nuro vehicle is a partnership with Kroger. Why will we see this much faster? Because the edge cases are much simpler. It's low speed, less dangerous, easier to solve, and highly useful. The business on the right is a company out of Israel called Shukit. This is a it's a hyper-local business. Nano services, a sort of nano deployment of the delivery tech. And so you're offloading bigger vehicles, solving the problem, and we're not going from last mile, we're going to last block with these guys. And I think this is a fast-growing business that will also help solve problems of congestion in communities. So people ask, well, what's the effect of autonomous vehicles in terms of free time? What are we going to see? How many hours a year? Globally, this is Morgan Stanley saying that it's going to be 600 billion hours a year. There are a billion cars in the world. In the US, which is not a high user of public transportation, there were 10 billion trips in 1 year recently. In 2017, 10 billion trips in public transportation. So we're going to see a lot of free time. And what the second question people ask is, well, what are they going to do with all this free time? And the answer is they're going to shop. And on this slide, in the UK, 20% of the people who have been surveyed say that what they do while they're riding in public transportation is shop to the tune of $13 billion a year. In Canada, the commuters are shopping to the tune of $411 a month. So we're seeing a lot of people shopping while riding. And this is a couple examples of businesses I think are pretty clever. One is an app for free transportation based on shopping. I like the idea of click and collect. So basically, you show up at the BART station, you show up at the MARTA station, wherever, WMATA station, you ride your train and you're buying something. By the time you get back to the station that afternoon, in a locker is your item. Take it home, try it on, don't like it the next morning, you put it in the locker and you return it. That's one example of the click and collect. On Freebird, it's a service that's providing free transportation to restaurants very, very successfully, high growth. And what they found very quickly in the data is that the average ticket for a person who had free transportation to a restaurant was 20% higher than a person who drove themselves to the restaurant. That's not surprising because obviously people will drink more if they're not driving. But they know who the big spenders are, and they can target the level of the ride for those folks to go there. So the prediction here is that retailers who transform their stores into experience centers, monetize the AV commute, repurpose the shelf space into distribution and click and collect centers will win. And finally, some other predictions for you. One is over the long term, transportation costs will enjoy Moore's law. So we'll see a significant decline in those costs for a long period of time. AVs will stimulate migration to and from the suburbs, resulting in development of these kind of villages or the suburbs 2.0. Cities will continue to develop, but might have even smaller units to accommodate folks who can't or who are priced out of the cities. Retail spaces will transform into social experience centers and distributions and logistics hubs. Experience-driven buses, vertical takeoff and landing, AVs will change where people live, work, and play, and some real estate may become more valuable. If you're commuting around a mountain and your commute is an hour and a half a day, and you can fly over the mountain in 5 minutes for low cost, you can think about what that real estate might be worth because of VTOL. City kids will have new access to attend better performing schools. I think this is both for city kids and suburban kids in various locations. And parking lots, garages will gradually be repurposed into revenue generating spaces. I think that's happening very soon. So finally, when people ask me, well, is there a killer business model today that you could see deploying very fast that could improve the environment, that could improve healthcare, what would that be? And I point to Copenhagen, where you see that you can own a bike, you can ride to the metro, and this is a city without particularly good, it doesn't have particularly good weather, but this is just an example of good public policy, and that's something else we need as well. So thank you very much, appreciate it.